Today we are very pleased to welcome John Hill to give us our last great Lenten lecture of the year. He's going to be speaking to us about liturgical theater. I think this is going to be a very interesting discussion, and we hope that everyone will give John their undivided attention. And after he finishes his presentation, we will have the opportunity to have a little bit of question and answer period. So without further ado, take it away, John.
Thank you, Father Gregory. If it were possible to go back in time about 450 years to Russia, to one of the major cities like Moscow, Novgorod, Rostov-Veliki, Volga, it is very possible that you could have seen something like this on Palm Sunday. What's going on here? This is a painting from the mid-19th century that depicts a procession. Who knows where this is taking place? What city? Moscow. It is in Moscow. The title said, yeah, the title said Moscow. The Kremlin on the right, Cathedral of the Protection of the Theotokos on the left. This is a recreation of Christ's entry into Jerusalem, very appropriate for today. Also interesting are the so-called actors leading, or let's say on the donkey, or the horse. It was usually a horse. Donkeys were kind of scarce in Russia for some reason. Yeah, is the patriarch. The patriarch is seated. He's over there on the left, on the far left. Leading the donkey is the Tsar of Russia. He is supported by two boyars. Again, this is a procession, so it's like a cross procession. There are young boys putting cloth and their clothes down, just like they did for Christ, carrying pussy willow branches. There are metropolitans and bishops following. So this picture here, it's a little bit, I don't want to say confusing. I don't see the Tsar carrying the reins, holding the reins. I see somebody over here who's not the Tsar. However, generally, the scenario for this procession was that the highest secular authority, right, whether it was the Tsar or the voivoda or the governor or whatever, would actually hold the reins and lead the patriarch from somewhere to somewhere else. Now, this ceremony goes back. It was inherited from the Greeks. The Greeks actually liked to put their bishops on donkeys, not just for the Palm Sunday procession, but for a lot of processions. We know that. The first time that it's mentioned in the historical account is from Novgorod in 1548. Okay? And it took place in many different cities. The painting was of Moscow. The first account is in Novgorod. We know it happened in Rostov, and so on. Okay, how do we know about this procession? Donkey. It's called the donkey procession. Хождение на осляти, шествие на осляти. Well, from foreign travelers' descriptions, and also from local records. Okay, these are the primary sources. Okay, here's another more period kind of engraving. The interesting thing about this is that it's going to the Kremlin, and at some point in time they started from here, which is a place on Red Square called Lobное место. Okay, they had different executions of this ceremony. Sometimes they came from Church of the Protection, went into the Kremlin. Sometimes they came from the Kremlin and stopped for about half an hour and then went back. Other times they went from Global Miesta. Different cities, of course, they had their own trajectory. Here's another picture. Okay, this picture is kind of interesting because of, you read in the historical accounts, some of them, there was a cart drawn by horses. It had a tree fastened to it, and attached to the tree were fruits. Apples, whatever sort of raisins, you know, whatever sort of fruit they have. My guess is that this has something to do with the tree that the Lord cursed on his way to Bethany, or to all part of this passion sort of cycle. Maybe Father Gregory or Father Michael will like speculate later about what the tree on the cart is. That was part of the procession. It wasn't in every procession, but you know, there, got a picture. We have a count. Okay, so there is some speculation, at least by the first scholar who kind of gathered these materials and wrote about these kind of processions and ceremonies that had a theatrical character to them, was that the donkey procession was used to reassure people during time of unrest. For instance, we know that in the time of troubles, the beginning of the 17th century, when there was no czar, and the Poles were in military control of Moscow, they still held the donkey procession, and one of the leading boyars, one of the leading noblemen, would lead the patriarch. In the later part of the century, there was a year when there was no patriarch. Nikon had been deposed, and so a metropolitan rode on the donkey. And the people supposedly felt a lot better about things to see the patriarch on the donkey and the secular authority leading. This is a very popular topic among modern scholars, secular historians. They like to speculate about what the power relationships were about, the czar giving deference to the patriarch, secular authority deferring to religious power. So it was canceled everywhere but Moscow in 1678. It's pretty clear that the patriarchy was behind this. They felt like it watered down the authority of the central power of the church in the patriarch to have these different processions going on in other cities. So it was stamped out everywhere except Moscow. And then at the end of the 17th century, it was not performed for a number of years. And then by the 18th century, of course, Peter the Great eliminated the patriarchy altogether, and there was no more donkey procession because there was no more patriarchy. And probably this picture of secular authority deferring to the religious leader was not a real sort of good image that Peter the Great wanted to propagate, so we don't see it anymore. Here's a very interesting picture. They did this a couple years ago, and maybe they still do it every year. I don't know if they're doing it in Moscow, but in Rostov, Veliki, obviously, they put a metropolitan on the horse. But what's unusual about this picture? What do you see or don't see that you would expect? There is no, exactly, Dimitri. There's no secular authority leading, just a couple priests or monks or something leading a group. What?
This one is a
Yeah. So it's like the donkey procession without the deference of the worldly power. Okay. On Holy Thursday.
John,
Yes.
is that all the further you're going to go with that?
For now, yeah. On Holy Thursday, at the end of the liturgy, right after the prayer before the ambo, we have another liturgical drama that is played out. It's called the washing of the feet. Remember that before the Last Supper, Christ washed the feet of the disciples. And this is something that was not stamped out. They do it in Moscow to this day. I don't know if they did it during the 20th century. But so here's what happens. No, I know they do it in the 21st century because these are recent pictures. I don't know if they did it in communist Russia. A basin, a pitcher, and a towel come out. So does the patriarch. The patriarch comes out, and it follows the so-called script of the Gospels. He rises from supper and laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded himself. Okay? Patriarch comes out without a staff, unaccompanied. He takes off his vestments, puts them down. After that, he pours water into a basin. He takes the pitcher and he pours the water in the cross 3 times. Glory to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay. And began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. So he starts on the left side.
John, could you hold on for a second? There's way too many side conversations going on here. It's very rude to the person who's speaking, and it's rude to us who can't hear what he's saying when too many people are speaking on the side. So please, listen to what John is saying. There'll be time for questions afterwards. Go ahead, John.
So while the patriarch is divesting or unvesting, the deacon comes out and reads the 50th Psalm very slowly. Another deacon, I think, brings out priests and archimandrites from the altar, 2 by 2, very slowly, very stately. He seats them. They sit there in the sanctuary. The patriarch starts up here, and he washes the feet. He goes down, starts over here. The very last person over on that side of the church, whatever priest is last, okay? These are the words of the gospel about Peter and Christ and the conversation that they had, and I made it into a play because that's what they do. Priest, dost thou, the priest, it says the words of Peter, right? Dost thou wash my feet? Christ, what I do thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter. Peter, thou shalt never wash my feet. Christ, if I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. Peter, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Christ, Jesus, I forgot to take that out. He that is washed needeth not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit, and ye are clean, but not all. Okay? There's similar dialogues in the donkey procession, at least towards the end of its historical existence, where the patriarch reads the words of Christ and the deacon reads the evangelist. Also, they added in exchange from getting the donkey going and finding the guy with the water pitcher. That was a couple of priests who did that exchange. So we're seeing already that it's starting to look like a play, right? Parts, audience, text. Probably the big best known so-called liturgical drama in early modern Russia was the so-called furnace play. This is the story of the 3 Hebrew youths who were with their people in exile in Babylonian captivity, and the king Nebuchadnezzar wanted everybody to bow down before the golden statue, and the 3 youths refused. So he had them put into the fiery furnace, but they did not burn up. From the book of Daniel. This is a rendering. The picture here is a rendering for a theatrical set by Rerik from the early 20th century. They did this in a theater kind of setting in the 15 and 1600s in Moscow, Vologda, Novgorod, wherever there was a bishop. You could do this, and it was very integrated into the liturgical life of the church. In fact, the evening before at Vespers, the 3 youths and the so-called Chaldeans who were responsible for the furnace, they came and they got blessings during vigil. They even went to the bishop's house.
John, what is the furnace? John, what is the furnace?
Furnace is like an oven. A furnace is where it burns really hot.
Yeah, I understand. But where it was in Sabor?
The furnace is this piece of art here. This is from Novgorod. This exists. It's in a museum in St. Petersburg. What they did is they took apart the ambo in front of the altar and they put this up.
So it was very much behind.
Behind. Well, in front of the iconostasis.
In front?
Yeah. We see Rerik's picture here. This is the furnace, okay? And the youths are up here. The 3 youths down here are the Chaldeans, right? Who are going to set them on fire. I got another view of that. Okay. Here's the top part of the picture. Here's that, and then the angel comes down.
John,
Okay.
what they are made for? If every time of whatever service, they're gonna set them on fire.
No. They didn't set everything on fire. This is already the closest to I wouldn't say a secular play, but it has parts. Okay, it comes out of the liturgy, of course, but they added this stuff by the Chaldeans to sort of help people to understand what was going on. They made up these lines for the Chaldeans, like, oh, the children are put in the furnace and they're not burning up, and I see three figures there, and now I see a 4th, and the 4th was the angel that came down. All right, the angel was made of paper or a parchment or something. And I don't, that's a good question why it didn't burn up. Maybe it did a couple times. They also had pyrotechnics. They had a special kind of powder from plantain or some kind of pollen of something. And the Chaldeans would throw it, and it would ignite and would make a great sort of pyrotechnic display. And so all the kids loved this, and it was very exciting. This is the time here in the 1400s and the 1500s that, if you know your Russian art history, they were building the great cathedrals in the Kremlin, and they had Italian architects come to supervise these projects and to make the designs for the Dormition Cathedral and the other ones, the big churches in the Kremlin. And so there's an idea that they brought some theater specials, some scenery pros from Italy, which at the time was also very advanced in terms of theatrical effects and scenery, and so the whole machinery to make this angel fly down into the furnace. It must have been a very affecting spectacle in the big cathedral and the furnace and the fireworks going off, and here the angel comes down while they're singing all of the troparia. So now we come to the question, is it theater? Well, if you remember at the beginning, my first slide had theater in quotation marks, And you know, I think that something like these performances in the church, just because it's not a secular performance, we do kind of have to be careful. It's not the same. We know how the church feels about theater from Chrysostom and others, writing about the secular entertainments that kept people from going to church on Sunday. We know that the liturgy and the liturgical drama and share a lot of the same things with the secular theater, but they're very different things. So I would be cautious about that. I mean, you can draw whatever conclusions you want. One way to trace sort of the development of theater and where it came from and you know, how it developed is this idea of theater as dramatic literature. In other words, the text is the primary thing. And if you have some sort of exchange of lines, you know, why should you wash my feet and all of that, and how it grows into a bigger exchange, and then finally a play. That's certainly one way to look at it. That's a way that privileges the written text. And so, if we're going to follow that line of thinking, and this has been developed in the story of Russian theater, they borrow a lot, I think, from the Western theater. And how, after the Greek theater sort of disappeared in the Dark Ages, you recall that the classical world had tragedy and comedy and basically all of the things that we sort of understand as in the West as theater today. They had the theater space, they had the actor, they had the chorus, they had the play, all these things. And then the classical world, as you know, at least in Western Europe, kind of went away. It lasted longer in the East. But historians of theater needed to find some other sort of, how did it come back? And the idea that they found was in the Western liturgy, the Paschal trope, or the Easter trope of quem quaeritis, whom do you seek? This is what the angel says to the three women who come on the Easter morning to look in the tomb. And an old chestnut of theater history is that this is the beginning of the sort of reemergence of theater in the West, because once you have these little plays here in the church, you get bigger plays, and then finally you take it outside and you have these carts and they go around the city and they play out these and once it's not in the church anymore, of course, you can have all sorts of comedic interludes and villains that are really over the top, and people start writing, you know, more plays that are not liturgical anymore. So that's sort of the trajectory of the Western theater, and then if you look at all through the early modern Western Europe, Spain, the Low Countries, England, Germany, what starts as drama or exchanges in the church and goes outside. You have the morality plays outside, which are based on Christian, you know, moral sort of subjects, temptation of Adam and every man. And just a few generations before Shakespeare, there are still these morality plays, and it's pretty easy to trace in England and in Spain how the morality plays become more like secular drama until you have the golden age of English drama, Spanish drama. So it's very tempting to try to make the same kind of narrative for Russia. Marina Svoboda from McGill, she wrote in a paper where she connects the Russian drama to the work of Simeon Polotsky and Dmitry Rostovsky and the school drama. They all, Polotsky has a Nebuchadnezzar play, which is the retelling of Daniel in the furnace play. Dmitry Rostovsky has something called an Assumption drama. The school drama, of course, was started by the Jesuits as a Counter-Reformation tool, but the Orthodox in the Ukraine and Moscow picked it up and used it. So that's kind of, you can sort of follow that thinking there. Svoboda does not mention this, but of course the first Russian play is very interesting. Was a play called Artaxerxes or Esther. It was in Moscow in 1672 for Alexei Mikhailovich. He decided, or his people decided that he needed a theater, and so they put together this court theater for him. They had a German pastor, his name was Pastor Grigori, Lutheran pastor, come and write this play and produce it and direct it. It was in Preobrazhenskaya in kind of a barn called Aptekarskaya Palata. It lasted about 6 hours or more. It was just this incredible thing. There was no theater, there was nothing like it, and all of a sudden there it was. It might have even been in German for the first performance. Later, I think they had some. The actors were young foreigners there in Moscow who worked for the court or were in commerce there or something. Later on, I think they got local Russian talent. It only lasted for maybe 10 years or so, and then it was gone. And then there was no more of this court theater, and it had to be reinvented again. Maybe through the school drama and Volodsky and Dmitry Rostovsky, who are also only a couple generations away from Tretyakovsky and Lomonosov, who actually started to write secular plays. And by that time, Russia had a theater that would last. And this was Empress Elizabeth's theater, a court sort of theater that. All right, so here's some artist's idea of what the Esther play looked like. Probably the Tsar over there on the left watching. Okay, I won't talk about that. So that's it. That's sort of where we're at with liturgical theater. Is it really theater? Did it actually turn into the Russian theater, which is very strong and wonderful? Those are good questions, and I don't have an answer, but I thought I would share these liturgical rites with you, chini, and so on. Thank you.
John, can I read
Yes, Dmitry.
a little addition? John mentioned that, like, for example, John Chrysostom and many Holy Fathers were strongly against the theater in their works. The main reason for that was that the theater in ancient Greece and Rome basically looked like modern Hollywood. So it was spectacular, it was very rude.
Oh, that's okay.
They actually were, sometimes even were killing the slaves on the stage, if it was according to the play to kill, or all kind of stuff, what you today will call pornography. So that all was the main reason why the Holy Fathers were so much against the Asian theater. Now, the Moralais that French plays they started in France, Moralais that John mentioned, was on the contrary prized by church very, very, loudly.
So the other thing that, when they did the play, right, they did not play Jesus Christ. They did not play Mary, right? So they did not
Passion play.
right? It was it's like icon. We don't really paint God, right? We don't do that. It's just a representation. So, you know, and Western theater did bring, like, you know, you play actually Jesus on the cross, and, you know, Mary. And I remember when we had problems, you know, to figure out how we can do the play with kids during Christmas, right? For Yolka, and that's a kind of, it was a big challenge for us too, right? To not to do Baba Yaga and not to do Mary. And so isn't that kind of one of the things that, you know, different, you know, from Western, right?
When you were talking about the purpose place, was it actually during the liturgy or after? It looks like it's
Yes, it was.
during
It
the liturgy.
happened right in the middle of the liturgy. Yeah.
And also you said that if it was a bishop, if it, say, church didn't have a bishop, they wouldn't do it?
They wouldn't do this right now. Had to have a bishop.
Значит, когда Гермоген был у Поликовского, митрополит,
Well, the donkey procession started. When did Russia get the patriarch?
But you mentioned the time of the Polish occupation,
Yeah.
and they actually arrested the patriarch at the
Oh,
time.
yeah.
So if they did it during Palm Sunday, who would be on the donkey?
A metropolitan. Yeah.
They did that during the communist times, John, when I was in St. Petersburg, the metropolitan, they became like Washington.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, that was something that the secular authorities really didn't have any problem with, just because of the image of a subservient, you know, religious figure. It was the donkey procession was the kind of opposite of that. Yeah, more problematic.
Отец Михаил, простите, если я правильно поняла, митрополит Никодим, так это была процессия еще в советское время, и они выходили за пределы академии, или это все было где-то...
No, it was for the умовение ног.
Умовение ног. Все, простите, я не...
That was pretty interesting how you joined any literature. Then you can view any literature, right? Like even Southern literatures as kind of exchange of lines, more or less kind of lines.
Sure, yeah, there are.
And some performance, right? So you can view that not only like washing feet or.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Please ask the questions loudly so that we can capture them on the tape.
I have a comment and a question. The comment is, I just recently read in a paper by Sergei Averyantsov that Peter the Great, when he abolished patriarchy, he himself went into one of the cathedrals and had the warriors, you know, strew, you know, their clothes under his feet. I just read it. I trust Averyantsov, but still just one source. But that I thought.
Well,
that was shocking.
what is the primary source that he's, you know?
It's a paper. It's a.
What-
That he quotes.
Yeah, what's
I don't know. I just read this paper, but I thought it was kind of quite. I didn't know Peter the Great went that far.
He did.
there are a lot of legends.
He was referred to as the Antichrist in Russia at that time among the
Yes,
believers.
that was the.
Because he did all kinds of sacrilegious
That
things.
were but he wanted to establish his power as God. So that's a comment. And the question is, I was also thinking about, you know, why in the Western Church, the Catholic Church, they do the nativity kind of plays or representations. Now, and from your conversation, I can see that the Easter was more, of course, we kind of fall into the pattern that we.
John, before you answer, I counted 5 side conversations going on right now, which is impressive, but not necessarily appropriate. So let's listen to the question and the answer, and then we'll have your own turn to ask the question of John. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so my question is, why do you think we stopped having those representations during Easter as a mass tradition?
You mean the donkey procession and the...
Well, the donkey, the worship of the food, so it's done here and there, but we don't do this as part of our feast festivities. Right? If you know what.
I don't know. I think maybe part of it had to do with the church being more sort of centralized and more bureaucratic and more sort of bureaucrats being, you know, in control, and the synod and stuff under Peter the Great, and also when Russia sort of jumped into modernism under a little bit Alexei Mikhailovich and a lot under Peter the Great. I just think it was a different time, and those things just, I don't know, didn't fit. I don't know. Good question.
I don't know if it's a question for you or for fathers. I think the main difference between the theater and parts of the liturgy that in the liturgy we have mystical presence, very big mystical presence, which is not in the theater. Right? And are all of these implied mystical presence? I'm sure that Amavianima, it is the case. I'm sure donkey procession, it is the case. Yeah, I don't know about other really theatrical in the Russian tradition, but
Well, as long as they're part of the liturgical, life of the church, then you have to assume that all of that is happening, right? The mystical sort of, right? They had a couple of other things that are included in liturgical, what we describe as liturgical drama. There was an end of the year ceremony, Lenten производства. There was a Last Judgment. I don't know if it was a play. I think it was just, I didn't talk about them because they're very minor and they didn't have a big sort of theatrical quality to them. Mostly they were just an exchange of lines, like from, instead of just the deacon reading the gospel, splitting it up right into parts, priest and deacon, or bishop and priest or something.
is it correct understanding of mystical presence, like we're really present at this moment, like burial of Christ?
Right. I don't think that you would necessarily say that something like this, even though it's a little bit extra liturgical, would be outside of that understanding. I mean, the idea of recreating something like Christ coming into Jerusalem, within the sort of broad overview of the church, would be to along the same lines. So I haven't read anything about this, so I can't say. Maybe there was some other specific thing that they were trying to do, but I would just say in general, if the church is blessing it as part of its liturgical life, then we can see it as something that has it also would be considered to be like we are mystically present when Christ comes into Jerusalem, whether the patriarch is riding on a horse or not, we are still there. But it's not necessarily something that we would see as bad or wrong.
Like we have services during the whole next week, so should they take it when I come to the service, really present, mystically present?
Yes, that is absolutely the way the church understands it. When we are here in church, we are mystically present at the events that take place. So when we are here in church on the Nativity, we are at the manger. When we are here during the Holy Week, we are with Christ as he is betrayed and as he is mocked. And when we are here for the service of his crucifixion, we are standing by the cross. So this is something that's beyond our human understanding completely, but it's the tradition of the church from time immemorial that we are participating in these things, because in eternity there is no time, there just is. And we begin to touch eternity in the church.
I think one of the problems, one of the confusions is caused by word theater itself. So because theater sounds like something fake.
Yeah.
So therefore, if we're mystically present, how can it be theater? But that's not at all what John implies. John implies that was the root of the theatrical movement, restoration in Europe and Russia. So basically, he mentioned it specifically during the lecture. When it moved outside, it became more and more theatrical, more fake, if you wish, over the years on outside of the church.
It was untethered from the liturgy, so it had to go.
At some point, it was very close, as Father pointed out.
Perhaps
So-
it would help if we made a distinction between the word theater and drama.
That's
Yes.
right.
Now, there's drama within the liturgical services, even though you wouldn't refer to them as theater.
That's right.
I think that's a good idea because I think that helps us categorize it more appropriately, because also within the canons of the church there are some canons that talked about actors and actresses, and for instance, a priest is not supposed to be married to an actress, and so on and so forth. So even though those canons now have slipped out of use, what was an actor before is not now. Still, we kind of have that thought. So I think that distinguishing between drama and theater in this case is probably a good idea. John?
Yeah, I specifically kept it as theater in quotation marks with
Right.
that sort of caveat, and didn't go to drama because to avoid the temptation of thinking about it as the literary drama, and that the root of theater and then how it got started and kept going was just through the play text and the sort of the literary thing, that theater or performance or whatever, in both the secular sense and in what we do in church, is more about participating in something as as using our bodies and sort of being there in the event and recreating. Is something that we Orthodox still have, but it was common all over Europe. If you look at the folklore and the songs and stories and stuff, people in early modern Europe, which is the earliest that these stories and stuff come down to us, like to all over Europe, wherever there were Christians in Europe, they recreated. In the Balkans, there's this custom of taking straw and putting it on the floor of the dining room, or taking chairs and tables outside to eat, and during nativity, right, to sort of greet the newborn Savior together in those conditions. It's the idea of Christ comes into the world, and the sort of the doors of heaven and everything are open, and animals talk, because it's such a special, magical night. All these legends about talking animals, legends of being able to find treasure on Saint John's Day, right? The midsummer, right? Because Saint John also is kind of the reflection of the birth of Christ, just the other side of the year. And so people used to identify with this a lot more. And then when the Reformation came, and Descartes and this idea of the body and the mind being so separate, we kind of, in the West especially, got a lot more abstract, and we don't have that sort of, at least everybody but the Orthodox are missing this idea of being bodily, present at these recreations.
We have element of that. To this day, right here in Ann Arbor, on the Christmas day, many people put the candles into the windows to let Mary and Joseph know that there is a room in the house. Fortunately, they're still there.
I had to step out a couple of times, so I don't know exactly how much you talked about this washing of the feet. But this is a really interesting and very powerful service. This is the only time that the bishop removes his own vestments in the church. Never happens otherwise. But specifically, no one can touch him to help him. He has to take off his own vestments. He has to tie that towel around him. He has to wash the feet by himself. And this is along the lines, of course, where Christ talks to the apostles and tells them that he came to serve, not to be served. So it only happens in a cathedral, but it is a very, very interesting and very powerful rite of the church. And if you ever get an opportunity to be at that, you should take advantage of that, because it really makes a very powerful impression upon you when you see this happen.
And when is this happening?
This is on Holy Thursday after the Divine Liturgy. So Holy Thursday is the day when the Lord first gave communion to his apostles, and after the liturgy, so the bishop will serve with 12 priests on that day, and then after the liturgy, they will go to the middle of the church, and this rite of the washing of the feet takes place.
That rite is also in a modified version, still done in the Roman Catholic Church. You may have heard a couple of months ago when the West was celebrating Easter that the new Pope washed the feet of some adolescent.
I found pictures of an Armenian bishop washing the feet of soldiers and Greek bishops doing this. So it must either be something that just seems natural to all sorts of Christian churches, or it's so old, it's a very ancient, rite that everybody has kind of preserved.
And it really sets the table for the next service of this liturgical week, which is the Lord's crucifixion. So that evening we come together when we read the Passion Gospels, and after Peter has just said, wash my hands and my head, and then he is running away. So it provides a very powerful juxtaposition also.
Do they put any oils in water or just using fluid?
Just water. Just water, no oil.
Можно в день омовения ног, например, каждый глава семьи, чтобы он мог своих.
So Maria's saying, is it possible that on the day of the washing of the feet, that the head of each family could wash the feet of his family members? I don't believe that there is any prohibition of this in the canons of the church. So perhaps you can try that this year at home and let us know how it works. Other questions for John?
So there is a saint actor,
There are several saints who are actors, actually.
and he was actually, I think it was the first one, and he was mocking the baptism.
Yes.
Well, Mary of Egypt, who we just commemorated last week, she was an actress, famous actress,
But-
Alexandria.
But that saint, he was caught in the act of mocking baptism, right? And here we go, he come out and he's Christian. So.
Yeah, he was the jester at the court of the Byzantine court. I can't remember his name right now.
Very strange.
And so of course at that time the Christianity was illegal and was not openly practiced in the empire, and so the jester was mocking the rite of baptism, and so he baptized himself at the court, to get some laughs. And then when he came out of the water, he was confessing Christ, and they were all laughing, and after a while they're like, all right, it's enough, stop. And he's like, no, I'm serious. And finally they killed him, and he's a martyr of the church.
Is that St. Canisius?
I don't remember who it is. I'll find the name, but he became a Christian by mocking Christ. And he's not the only one, but he's the most famous one. Well, thank you, John, very much for a really interesting talk.